What would Plant vs. Zombies Fusion look like in the Plants vs. Zombies 2 art style? Plants vs. Zombies Fusion is becoming quite popular these days, as many fans enjoy coming up with new and creative ideas by combining different plants. Fans love it because it introduces more challenging levels, new plants, new zombies, and fun minigames. However, PvZFUSION uses the original Plants vs. Zombies art style. That's why I decided to reimagine this using the Plants vs. Zombies 2 art style, just to see what they would look like. In this video, I will focus to changing the Plants Fusion to PvZ2 style, and I will show you the speed paint of how I drew them, and I also honesty rate from 1 to 10. Before we proceed, I already done the part 1 and 2. You can check it in link in the description. Also, don't forget to subscribe, it will help me a lot. Starting with Magnetar. I began by importing the images of Magnet Shroom and Starfruit, then combined them to fit the body of Magnetar. I also used an image as a guide to trace a perfect outline. This method skips the sketching phase and goes straight to outlining. At this point, I started outlining the star shape. Then I moved on to the eyes. I simply copied Magnetar's original eyes, and I did the same for his mouth. Next, I began outlining the magnet. I adjusted it slightly to the left to make it more accurate. After that, I added a leaf to Starfruit's right arm to improve the design, and I outlined all the leaves. The small star on his head comes later, after I finish coloring the body. Now, I started coloring the body red, like Magnetar's original color. Then I added a blue touch to the corners of the star. I made sure there was a smooth transition between colors, just like how Starfruit blends red and blue. Also, if you notice, Starfruit in PvZ2 has shadows, unlike PvZ1. So, I added shadows to Magnetar in the PvZ2 style. I carefully added them to create a smooth transition and blend. Starfruit also has a dark line in a certain part, so I added that to Magnetar as well. The line has a soft blend at the end, which I also recreated to match the base color. I noticed the color looked a bit flat, so I added lighting to make it look slightly 3D. I placed a lighter color in the middle of his face, based on Starfruit's design. I also added highlights and reflective light to enhance the 3D look. Next, I worked on the eyes. I started by adding the base color. If you're wondering why I didn't use the bucket tool, it's because I prefer doing it manually. It feels more satisfying. Then I added the blue pupil and shadows to both the eye and tooth. I added small details inside the pupil, followed by Magnetar's adorable blue freckles. Before that, I colored the leaves red. And then moved on to coloring the magnets. Afterward, I carefully added shadows to the magnets for balance and added light spots on both the magnets and the leaves. I also added secondary shadows and then highlights to the magnets to make them shine. I included a soft sky blue reflective light on the magnet as well, and blended the leaf color with the body to keep that natural blue tone. I almost forgot to add rendering on the face, so I added shadows and lighting to match the PvZ2 art style. Then, I cleaned up the outlines so the body would look even better. As I mentioned earlier, I added the star on his head after finishing the body. I drew the star outline, filled it with a sky blue base color, and then added a darker blue for the shadow side, just like on the body. Then I added highlights on the edges and a lighter blue glow in the center. Finally, I cleaned up the outline color. Lastly, I added glow and details. And there you have it. Magnetar, but in PvZ2 style. I like how it turned out. The original is naturally cool, but this version is a lot cleaner, simple, detailed, and high definition. I rated 9 out of 10. The second one is Torch 3, a 3-headed torchwood. I started by creating the reference. After that, I proceeded to make the outline by tracing over the reference, and then I improved it by adding eyes and mouths to the other 2 heads. Next, I chose a brown color similar to torchwood and used it as the base color for the body. Then, I selected a darker brown by adjusting the color wheel slightly toward red. I used this darker color to add shadows to the parts that the light doesn't hit, usually the areas opposite the light source. For example, on a cube, if the light hits one side, the shadow appears on the opposite side. We apply the same logic in our drawing to make it look more 3D. Moving on, I picked a color slightly lighter than the shadow for secondary shadows, also known as the midtone. Then I selected an even lighter brown for the wood highlights. I placed these highlights on the upper parts of the face, especially around the eyebrow area and along some cracks in the wood. Next, I added a more saturated brown for the reflective light, which comes from the fire's glow. I then colored his lips with a lighter brown, just like in Torchwood's original design. I also added yellow to some parts of the wood that are strongly lit by the fire. Then I started coloring the eyes yellow, just like in the reference, and also colored the teeth. I added red to the pupils and put shadows on the eyes and teeth to enhance the depth and detail. After that, I colored the fire yellow and added white spots to the flame, just like in Torchwood. Next, I removed the outline from the fire to make it look more natural, and I added glow effects around the edges of the fire to give it that soft, fiery look. Finally, this is the look of Torch Tree in PvZ2 Artstyle. This one is much better. I also like it, so I rated 9 out of 10. Third on our list is Golden Kelp. I used the PvZ2 Tangle Kelp as a reference for the body. I started by tracing the body to create the outline for our Golden Kelp. Then, I removed the reference and began applying the base color. I chose a not-so-saturated yellow as the base and carefully filled it in. Next, I picked a slightly more saturated orange to use for the shadows. I followed the same shadow style as Tangle Kelp. If you look closely, its shadows aren't solid but smoothly blended with the midtones. This type of soft shadow works well on wavy, flat surfaces like the tentacle-like leaves of Tangle Kelp. Then, I used a normal airbrush to add small, subtle shadows to increase contrast and depth. After that, I moved on to coloring the lighter parts of the leaves. I blended the light areas carefully, just like I did with the shadows. But then I realized it didn't look like gold yet. So, I added more highlights, since gold is very shiny. I added white highlights to give it a glowing effect. Then came my favorite part of coloring gold. I added reflective light to both the shadowed and light areas of the gold. This really made it pop. Next, I carefully added black to the face area, following the original look of Tangle Kelp. For the eyes, I chose a glowing yellow color because it looks cool and matches the golden theme. For the final touch, I changed the color of the outline to make it look cleaner. And this is the final result. I really like how it turned out. As you can see, it looks much better than the original. So, I'd rate this one a 10 out of 10. That's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me out. See ya!